Hello everyone, and welcome to Spiel. Today's video is the Button Mash Gaming Awards, which, if we're honest, is really just the Me Gaming Awards, because even though there are two of us running Button Mash, I'm the only one who's had any input on selecting what I'm about to award, so it's my choices. I'm not a professional, bear in mind I don't get given loads of games by all the publishers, so I haven't played everything and I don't get to see everything. So I can only judge what I've played, and I've played what I've bought, which is a fair few things, but nowhere near as comprehensive as perhaps some other outlets might have available to judge from. I'm also going to be a little bit lenient on what's 2012, because I think everybody else does really as well. Everybody else sort of picks October, November time from 2011, so I'm going to allow myself the same luxury. So without further ado, here is the Button Mash Gaming Awards. In the first category today is Best Platformer. I think there are a considerable number of platformers out there on the market today, and a lot of them aren't all that great. There's a lot of same old going on. Not a terrible amount of innovation. I would argue Braid is largely to blame for a lot of that. Everyone wants to do a puzzle platformer now because one did it well. So, for someone that's actually innovated on the whole thing, I'm going to award this to A Valley Without Wind, which was a platformer at its core, but there was so much more in there. It had a lot of exploration and RPG elements, had a procedurally generated world with dungeons and bosses in them, and ultimately the world was just infinite. It had this sort of cool post-apocalyptic rebuilding the world with magic and exploration thing going on, and it's just deep. There's that much to find and do. There's a lot there, and it's a great game. It's well worth checking out. So yeah, best platformer of the year, A Valley Without Wind. Next category is best adventure game, of which I've played quite a few lately, so I've got quite a few notable mentions at any rate. I can't give them all the award, much as I might like to. I suppose they're my awards, I could do, but I'm not going to. So yeah, runners up, I would say Deponia, certainly, just for reminding me a lot of Monkey Island, which if you've ever seen my Minecraft avatar, you'll know I'm a fairly big fan of. It's just Monkey Island with a steampunk motif for the modern day. Same kind of gameplay, same kind of humour. It's Guybrush reborn. Also, there's the third instalment of the Penny Arcade series on the Rain-Slick Precipice of Darkness, which has been a long time coming. Episodes 1 and 2 were done some years back by a different developer who dropped the series, and I think it was Zeboid Games remade episode 3, and I'm very glad they did. They've done an excellent job of it. They've taken the style of old school RPGs, your sort of older era games, and I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I feel like I'm missing something here. Where haven't I gone? It takes the old RPGs and incorporates a lot of new mechanics. There we go. Incorporates a lot of new mechanics to make it more accessible to the modern gamer who are more familiar with different mechanics these days. And it creates a really good experience. I also want to mention, and it's not really an adventure game. Tell you what, I'll give you the award before I give this other mention, because I'd always kind of lump them together in my mind. The award I want to give is to the Moon. Fantastic little, very simple as far as the game goes. Nothing particularly complex. but the story is incredible. It's one of the deepest, most moving stories I've seen in a game, probably ever. It's definitely one of the best games I've ever played in my life. The other title that I associate with it is Analog: A Hate Story. The reason I associate it is not because it's a similar game, because it's not. The reason I associate it is because it's got the same depth of story. It is also a fantastic story and it's well worth playing through, but it's not an adventure game. It is a visual novel, if anything. I suppose if I were to categorise it, it's not something I had categorised. It would be winner in the best visual novel of the year. So yeah, there we go, new category, best visual novel, Analog: A Hate Story, best adventure game, To the Moon. So everybody wins there. Congratulations everybody. Next category I've got might be a contentious one, which is best shooter. There are a lot of them out there, and everybody's got their favourites and everybody wants them to win all the awards, and I'm going to pick the one that nobody else probably ever did. I want to give this to Guns of Icarus Online. There's a lot of modern military shooters, and we're making the move to a lot of futuristic shooters. There's things like Tribes and other very similar ones. A lot of free-to-plays out there that look quite well polished out there, but they're all, at the core of them, much the same. Guns of Icarus is a steampunk-styled airship flying shooting game. You're manning one of a variety of different airships. You have a pilot on board the ship, you have 2 gunners and an engineer. Well, you can have any mixture of any of those classes you like, but that's the usual. That's the usual crew makeup. And between us, you've got to shoot down all the rival airships. It adds a considerable amount of strategy and teamwork to shooting that you don't normally get, and I like it a lot. It's a great game. I've said before, I said last week in fact, I'm still looking for someone I'd like to do a Let's Play with. Someone please throw me a message and let's get this stuff on the YouTubes. Next category I have is Best Puzzle Game. That's kind of a broad genre because lots of things fall under puzzles really, if we're honest. The one thing I do want to give the award to though is Quantum Conundrum. It was designed, very very obviously once you play it, by the same guy who came up with the concept for Portal. It is a first person physics bending puzzle game. So you can see where the Portal elements come in. You play a small child who is given access to a dimensional manipulation device, and by changing the properties of things in the world you can solve a variety of clever puzzles. It's got... the writing's not quite as great as Valve's, but whatever was. But the puzzles are just as well designed and the game's excellently polished. There's a lot of fun to be had in that. I will also give special mention in this category, those who've been following my channel will have noted, Scribblenauts. Scribblenauts Unlimited, that is the release for this year, because there are previous Scribblenauts. It is a fantastic game. It's charming, and the amount of creativity you can have is amazing. Just the sheer number of ways to solve any given puzzle. It's a tremendous amount of fun, and well worth checking out as well. As a category, I suspect that most publications probably wouldn't award, because it's a new emerging genre, but it's a genre I seem to end up talking about at length on numerous occasions. If one goes and reads the Button Mash blog, as it were, on our main website, it is MOBAs. I'm going to award the best MOBA of the year. I would dearly have liked to, and earlier in the year I may have even been tempted to have done so, given it to Super Monday Night Combat. But unfortunately that's had a lot of issues of late. It's not quite the game it started out as. It did a lot of very good things for the genre. It was an excellent game. It did, by making it into a third-person shooter, it made it a lot more accessible to a lot of people more familiar with that kind of gameplay than the running around third-person World of Warcraft arena kind of combat. Unfortunately, it just never quite saw much appeal. It was never well marketed. It never took off in the way that it needed to have been successful. And when it's an online game, it needs to be at least halfway successful to be a reasonably playable game. So when you've got to wait half an hour for every single game, and the only people playing it are infinitely better than any newcomer, it's just not going to be fun for anybody to try and get into, and it's very difficult for me to recommend at this stage. The game I will give it the award to is Awesome Nauts. Awesome Nauts does a lot of the same things well. It's a much more accessible game than most MOBAs. And it's got a fantastically charming art style, a great soundtrack, and I think it's very, very deserving of the award. It's 3v3 instead of 5v5. It's 2D game. It's much simpler. It's much easier to pick up, and yet just as difficult to master. It's still a very deep game. There's still strategy in there. So I think on that basis it is thoroughly deserving of Best MOBA of the Year award. I've got a category of Best Action Game because that seems like a category I should have, but again, it seems like a broad category. That could describe a lot of things. One thing I most want to give this award to, though, is Super Hexagon. Now, that may be predominantly because it's fresh in my mind, but it seems to fit the bill quite well for me. Thinking about what's my favourite action game of the year, it's got to be Super Hexagon. There's a few videos of it up recently. You can see how much fun I have with it. It's amazing. I think the most satisfying part of it is watching other people play, though, because it's brutally hard. Everybody gets massively frustrated, and it's incredibly entertaining to watch them get very frustrated with it. So that's fantastic for a good laugh. It's just the sheer simplicity combined with the challenge and the quick turnaround on the game. It's really addictive. It's really fun. And it's got, again, they've picked out some great music to work that works really well with it. Fantastic one that's well worth looking at, and it's only £2 on Steam. It costs you next to nothing. Moving on to non-genre categories, I'd like to award one for Best Soundtrack. There have been a lot of good soundtracks. Sound and music is something that's done very, very well these days. I've got a few notable mentions for this. I've already said I love Awesome Nauts soundtrack. Same time Super Hexagon as well. But the one I want to give it to, and this is probably the oldest title on the list, dating back to October of last year, it's Sequence, which was a rhythm game with a multitude of input options. You could play it on a dance mat, you could play it on your keyboard, you could play it with an Xbox controller or a guitar, you could play it on damn near anything you liked. That was an excellent design choice. But to add to a sterling game, the soundtrack was by one of my favourite artists, or an artist that would become one of my favourites from this game, which is Ronald Jenkins. I've raved about him at length last week, in fact it was. A fantastic artist, and this is the game that introduced me to him. His music fits the game absolutely perfectly. It makes for a great fast-paced combat in an RPG with great rhythm elements. So if that's not too old for you to go into a 2012 award, I'd definitely say go check that one out. For art style, that's another thing that's done very well these days, with all the big shots throwing out more and more realistic looking graphical style every year. Things like your Skyrim and everything continuing to attempt to push the boundaries with every iteration. A lot of your smaller games have decided, well, we can't compete with that. The best way to take it forward is an awesome art style, a better aesthetic, if you will. And because everybody's had to go the same direction, there's a lot of excellent art out there. But I think the one team that always does it very well is Amanita Design, and their title this year, Botanicula, was no different. A fantastic, really charming style, and that's well worth a look. There's a lot of other great ones as well. It was a very difficult choice to make in this one. But yeah, Botanicula it is. The best story of any game, I've kind of already given this one away. It's a fairly obvious one, I should imagine, for me. It's To the Moon, one of the best stories I've ever played. It's not best story of the year, it's the best story I've ever played in a game to date. End of. With very, very special mention, again, to Analog, A Hate Story. I've only got one more award to do, so I'm just going to meander around the elevator till I give it. The final award is obviously, it's the big one, it's the final one, it is the Game of the Year! Da, 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 da. Again, at the risk of giving all the awards to the bloody thing, it's To the Moon. It's about 4.5–5 hours long, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. I've never played a story that's made me feel as involved as that story has. It's truly incredible. It does have a fantastic soundtrack, great style going on. It's just phenomenal. If you buy one game this year, make it To the Moon. So that's pretty much all the important categories that I can think of covered. If I haven't covered a category you were hoping I would cover, sorry, I'm not going to cover it. So as always, leave your comments. I'd love to hear what you think about what I have to say, and if you've got any topics you'd like me to talk about in future, again, you can leave them in the comments, and if it's anything I'm in any way qualified to talk about, I'll have a ramble. So, until next week, I shall see you later.